right, so welcome to our Friday edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. This is our open Q&A session where our goal is to provide a forum for transitioning military, veterans, military spouses, and allies to ask questions and get help while they're on their Salesforce learning journey. Um, any Salesforce technology related topics are fair game. So if you're stuck in a trailhead badge, you have some kind of issue or challenge at work, or just any other Salesforce tech related question, feel free to use the raise hand icon and we'll see if we can help you out. The only thing that we ask is that for Salesforce super badges, we avoid those because that would be a violation of the Salesforce policy in discussing them because they treat those like credentials. So after the call, if you want to stay connected to the group, you can sign up on mtofficehours.com. We'll send out a weekly reminder. You can follow our page or our group on LinkedIn. And then we also have a private Slack workspace where you can connect with others after the call. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and we will go through the questions in the order that I see them on my screen. And I see Sandy is in the top left. What do you got, Sandy? Besides a cat in your hands.
Frida is visiting again. Two things. First, friendly reminder that when you update a flow or anything like that to a different API, that you should probably troubleshoot the entire thing because there are sometimes changes that happen that could make things not work right anymore.
Did you validate before you pushed it up?
I didn't push it up. Somebody else did.
Oh, well.
But because I
let's hear the
didn't know
story.
that,
Sounds like there's a
I
story
didn't know
behind
that
this
they
one.
had done that when I went to go troubleshoot. I didn't think about checking the API version to see what was going on. So apparently, I think it was around version 54, you no longer had to, when doing percentages in a formula, you no longer had to multiply by 100. So somebody went from a version 49 to 61. And so all of a sudden, people were getting commissions that were 100 times more than what they were supposed to be getting.
I mean, that sounds great for the people who get the commissions.
Right. Oddly enough, nobody put in the trouble ticket. I just happened to find it when I was making a different change to the flow and I was troubleshooting.
Now,
So
here's the thing. So
for over a month.
So I think I'm going to make a comment and then I'm going to ask the group a question on this one, right? So the comment that I would have is that I think this is really where a lot of the testing, like the flow test or your Apex tests and things like that, really come into handy because you flip that API version, you run your tests, and if they're passing, at least that gives you a little bit of a warm and fuzzy that, okay, maybe it didn't totally blow up. And it might have caught something like this where, if you're validating that a value is 1,000, now it's coming out to 100,000. That would definitely be an indication. So flow tests, Apex tests, I think that's really where they would shine. Now, the question I have is, and this is something I struggle with on the managed package side, with our app on the App Exchange, is when you go and update the API versions. So I guess there's a couple of schools of thought, right? There's well, if it's working and the API version hasn't been deprecated, leave it as is. And then when you need to, you can update it and then you can test and everything else. Then there's on the other end of the spectrum, there's the folks that are like, okay, every Salesforce release, we are just going to go through every piece of metadata we have. We're going to put it on the latest API version, test everything, do a full regression test, and we're just going to stay always on the latest. So I'm just curious, what are folks' thoughts?
I have already encountered the changing an API can break things that you intended for it to not break. And so I would rather just wait until, you have to, or until there's a feature that makes more sense to, update everything anyway. Because otherwise you're spending a lot of time trying to do things depending on how big or how complicated a flow might be. That's my personal opinion, especially after learning the hard way.
Yeah.
But I
Brian,
actually
I
have
saw
a
you take a deep breath.
too.
Did you have one too?
I have an actual.
No, I do them as needed, except right now, the world of flows, especially the screens, are changing so much that keeping them, if you're not going with the most modern API on them, you're missing out on half the functionality. So
yeah, I think so where I kind of settled on this is that when I have a particular feature, like let's just say like a Lightning Web Component that I'm going to be adding and doing a lot of work on. Since I'm already there, and since I know I'm already going to be going through all the testing, I'll make it a point to just update the APIs so that I can do all the testing and I don't have to test it twice, right? And I think that with flows, especially something like a screen flow, I feel like that is a really good opportunity when you're working on a screen flow or making changes, update that, because generally speaking, they could be kind of self-contained. Now, of course, if you're calling a bunch of like subflows and things like that, there's some complexity there. But my school thought has been as I work on it, that's when I update it. So yeah,
Pretty
no,
much
that's a
same.
good one. Sandy, what was your other thing? Was that you had one point? Yeah, the second point there too.
Yeah. So I was working on an org and they have a bunch of fields that they were hoping to kind of do that whole, if we select this, you see these fields and fill these ones in, all that kind of stuff. So I was trying to make use of the dynamic forms and, visibility stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned that they have that dynamic function for individual fields, but not sections. So as such, does anybody have a easy method of applying these filters to 40, 50 fields
Okay.
so that they're more dynamic?
Okay, hold on a second. That can't be true. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Let's just take a quick look at this for those that might not be aware. So
Can
share.
you say that one more time, Sandy?
So that the visibility conditions, when you're in the Lightning App Builder,
Yes.
on individual fields, it's
Yes.
dynamic. So
Yes.
it will actually evaluate your criteria before save. If you do it on a section, it is after save.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So the visibility filter, if I said that I only want to display this section if the status is equal to in progress, if I change this from in progress to something else, it's not going to just make that section disappear. It would always be after save.
Yep.
I guess that would kind of make sense, right? Because if you had a field in that section that you changed, and then you're like, oh,
No.
wait, that's not right. I need to change
Well,
it back. Like,
what I was doing was I had the field that would make that in a different section, and then all the fields that pertain to it in its own section, and then the fields that pertain to a different one in a different section. And that way I would just be like,
yeah. What
I
about
figured it, but
You would have to have a really strong data model for that on like what is affecting what, like the cascade effect.
I mean, it works on the individual ones. It was just like, I mean, obviously the other option would be to do record types, but
I was going to say lightning actions. What about that? So if you had all the fields you care about in a lightning action, and then would that visibility filter apply when you change
I
the
don't know.
field, or do you have to save first?
That I don't know. I know that when I tried it, it didn't work. And then I started looking it up, and I think I harassed Ryan about it too. And
What
that's kind of,
what type of field were you using to set that? Was it
it was a pick list.
a pick list? Okay, so if it were you know, a checkbox or something else, would that be the same?
There's actually an idea on the idea exchange about the fact that sections as a whole do not have that capability.
Gotcha.
And so I was just wondering
Okay.
if anybody had a easier way, because I don't want to have to do that for 40, 50 fields individually.
I wouldn't call it easier, but there probably is a way. I mean, if it was like the key, it's the cornerstone of your user's UI, and you had to make this perfect and it had to work. I mean, you could probably go down the route of like a Lightning Web Component, but that's definitely not easier.
I
That's
can't. Not me.
yeah,
That's not in my wheelhouse. So
yeah. I don't think there's a way around that. If you can, I don't know if you already did this, but any chance you have that idea that you can throw in the idea in the chat so we can take a
probably.
look at? All right, well,
Yeah.
that's good to know. I don't think I've ever had that use case, having a field change impact the visibility of an entire section.
I mean, to me, it just makes sense, because if you've got a lot, it's a lot faster to do a bunch of fields than it is to do all of them.
Yeah.
I don't know if the use case lends itself, but tabs, I believe, can be displayed or not displayed based on values. Another one. So I know, like I said, it's not an ideal solution, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, it wouldn't work when they're like creating the record. Like part of it is when they create the record, they want the certain fields to be filled in depending on if it's this type or that type kind of thing. I had the idea.
Flow instead?
Can you say could use a flow instead?
Yeah, because I just did something similar with a screen flow where you can use a formula field dynamically to display other fields, which is to me still a relatively new feature of flow and still has some quirks, but
Absolutely, but putting a screen flow in place of the standard new button is not easy, and it's not a skill I have, nor have we scoped that in for this client.
okay. I mean, that might maybe something we could do in another session because that's actually a pretty good use case for that, I would think. Replacing like a standard new button with a flow. I mean, unless you got a gazillion fields and it's just like a time sink for you, but I mean, you can definitely do that. I've definitely done that where you just replace that new create button with the flow.
Yeah, and I think the challenge with that is though, I think that would solve maybe solve one of the problems, but I mean this is one of those things where it should just work, right? Shouldn't have to find the workaround to get it to work. Sandy, I suggest that you go get a JavaScript certification, get an Apex certification, and then build your Lightning Web Component and Apex controller, and that should solve the problem. So
Yeah, I think just skimming through it, I'm pretty sure that the actual Salesforce help article also says that it's not available in sections, but I haven't found the actual idea yet. I know that
Okay.
there is one.
all right. Well, any other thoughts on this one before we move on?
I'm
Anthea.
just looking at the page layout, and when I click on a section, I do get the set component visibility on the right.
Yeah,
Are
you
you
can
saying
do
that you
it.
can't do that because
No,
okay.
you can do it. It just doesn't evaluate the criteria until after save. So if you change the value on the field, it doesn't automatically display or not display sections. Like if you
So
do it specifically on a field, it's dynamic.
So let's just say here's an example, right? If you can see my screen. So here's
Mhm.
one section with a pick list field, and then here's another section. So if I were to go into the visibility filter here, let's get rid of that. And I say I only want to display this section if the status is equal to in progress, or actually let's just say completed. All right. So this section only displays when status is completed. So we'll save this. And in theory, when this saves after 20 minutes of waiting, there we go. Okay, so we go back here. So now I would expect that section is not displayed, which it's not. It's like a budget section that we have there because the status right now is in progress. But if I were to change this to complete, so I changed it, still not there. But as I save, now it pops up. So in other words, this should be controlling the visibility of this section, and it does, but only after the record is saved. So it's not like if I, now change this to in progress, that's going to disappear immediately. It only disappears after I click save. So
On the idea exchange.
Does it change immediately if you use the edit button?
good question. So I was doing the quick edit, I guess. Yeah. So if I go to edit, and then, so where is that section? Okay, so there's no section there because it's still in progress, but if I change it to completed, doesn't pop up. No. So whether you're in the edit screen, it still does not do it until you would click save. Yeah.
And just to be clear, Sandy, you want it ideally would be for both use cases, right? When they're doing a new or edit
Mhm.
top versus in in-page edit, like on the fly, either case, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why, an alternative would be record types, because that would essentially do the same thing.
I mean, I would certainly go for a flow rather than starting record types. I'm so anti-record types dealing with the tech debt in my org. It's just a freaking nightmare.
I understand that, and I know that there are cases for that. But again, like to me, I think honestly, a record type would be faster than trying to do a flow and then create a component and replacing a new standard button and all that kind of stuff. And especially when it comes down to what you're scoping in a project for. So, unfortunately, when you have to come down to the consulting role and what your time allows for, whether you're dislike or like a certain feature, it's really your client you got to think about.
All right. Any other thoughts on this topic before we tell Sandy that we can't help her and we have to move on?
Another fruit basket.
Yep. All right. Let's see. I see. Ken, I just want to make sure you had a hand up earlier. Did we answer your question, or do you have something else you wanted to go through?
I did have a new one that I was hoping maybe we could spend some time on. I know we're not, I always say I'm not a developer, but I play one in real life because I'm a Salesforce admin. So, we have, as I mentioned, a lot of tech debt. And one of the challenges for me is because I've programmed, I can kind of understand what Apex is doing, but that's not really the point is, if there's a quick and dirty, or hoping someone might know, how we can simply figure out, first identify and then change the Apex running user, if that's the right term. Like we have all these admins that have been frozen because they kept playing kick the can and no one really figured out what processes they were all running. And I'm just talking primarily with Apex right now. So specifically, I found that and I don't know if this is related to mass action scheduler or not.
Let me pause you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me pause you. So when we're talking about the running user of Apex, to me, there's really two things that come to mind. When we have triggered logic, that's going to be running in the context of the current running user and potentially in system context, but it's the running user that's actually triggering that it's running in. When we talk about scheduled Apex or scheduled batch Apex and things like that, the way that you would confirm who's running those would be from the scheduled jobs page in setup. And just for those that might not be aware, let me just show that real quick.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. I should have mentioned, I think I'm talking primarily about, these are scheduled, right?
Yeah. So when we go to scheduled jobs, this will show us a list of all the scheduled stuff. And of course, this org that I go into has nothing here, but if you had any kind of scheduled like dashboard refreshes, scheduled triggered flows, I believe would be here. Scheduled Apex, all that stuff would be here. And if you look at this, there should be a submitted by, and that would be the person that if it's scheduled batch Apex or scheduled Apex, the submitted by is going to be the user that's actually running as.
Right. And I know that I've run into this problem myself. And it also, like, if we've got any of those third-party apps that have stuff, basically whoever set that up, it's usually going to be running under them and stuff like that, which is where I ran into that issue.
Right. So my question is, how do you change it? Is there a way of doing it? I'm hoping there's a way we can do it maybe with data loader or even VS Code or a hack or something that I don't have to literally go in and manually delete every single Apex job and reschedule every single Apex job.
Well, I don't know if you can or not. Let's see. Sandy, you got a thought?
Well, I know that depending on what it is, like it's sometimes will be based on the app itself, like it will redo all of it. So, like in the case that I worked with, I want to say it was Sly Broadcast. And whoever set it up, there was like 6 that were running regularly throughout the day. So all we had to do was kind of re-log in and just reschedule it, and it would automatically do all of them.
So it may be a two-pronged question because I just wanted to mention, I mean, a lot of these were set up using the Mass Action Scheduler, which is an unofficial Salesforce tool. But what I've noticed is do you mind if I share my screen just to illustrate?
Yeah, go. And then I think I might have a solution for you.
Yeah.
And this is also a good case to use integration users. That way, when people do leave.
Yeah, but But
Well-
okay, so I'm with you on all that. Sorry to interrupt, but like, yeah, so I've tried to do all those things, but basically, you'll notice what's interesting, and this is again, this is a third party unofficial Salesforce tool, Max Action, but basically it just creates Apex jobs, right? So what's interesting is if you look at last modified, I've literally updated every single one of these, and it still shows last modified by, which appears to be a field on the math. I don't know where that field is coming from, as these old admins that are no longer here.
Yeah.
So every single one of them should say last modified by me, but it does not. And so that's what I'm trying to get at. Now that's one question. And then the other thing is we do have stuff outside of this tool. So it's not specific to Mass Action Scheduler. Maybe that's kind of throwing a monkey wrench into things, but
Well, yeah, Ken. So I think that the key thing to remember is that whatever that tool is that you have there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that even whatever you do through mass action configurations here, it's still going to go through scheduled jobs on the back end. So if you just go into setup and go to your scheduled jobs, I'm curious to see what you have there for Apex in there.
yeah. And everybody, is it scheduled jobs or Apex jobs? Scheduled jobs.
Scheduled jobs, yeah. So yeah, so
So
if it's not here, then it's something. Okay, so it is here. So what I was going to mention is that what I just found out, we have a scheduled batch Apex that runs that was scheduled through the installation of a managed package. So when we look there, submitted by, it actually has the managed package name. Now, if we just pretended that was some other user that is no longer active, if you click on the manage button on the screen and don't change anything, you just click on the manage next to one of the jobs
hold on, let
and
me.
you change.
I am in production now, just because it's the only way I can
Well, here
really.
I can share my screen. I'll do it. I'll do it in
If
my
you don't mind,
production. I can show you,
rather
but
try to. Let me just give me a second. Hold on. Specified job. So like for example, wait, I was trying to find one that failed. So for example, this one. So notice how it says current user Matt, who no longer works here, right? So
yeah.
no matter how many times I resubmit this, it keeps showing up as
Okay.
this.
So let's find that in the scheduled job screen.
So where's the ID here? I think it's in here. Wait. No, it's not in here. This is the flow error. So but let's just filter by see what the job name. I thought I added a thing for this, but all right, whatever. All right.
Yeah. So whichever job it is, if you just click on that manage button that's next to the current job and just click reschedule job, don't make any changes. Just click on that reschedule. It'll now put it as you, as the running user.
Yeah, I just want to be very careful I don't change one that's not something. Hold on, wait. You can't even use contains. This is also all these weird things. I think you have to do it like this or something.
Oh,
No.
what I was going to say is if you want to try that offline, if you want to come, we can come back to this once you find the one that you want to try it with. But if you just hit that manage button, hit save, it should update it to the you being the current running user. And just like don't
Literally
change
right.
anything, just click reschedule job.
I'm pretty sure I tried that too. But that's why I wanted to find one that was. I'm sorry, just trying to prepare this ahead of time. I assume it's always in classic. It seems to always go to classic. Wait, submitted by.
All right. While you're looking at that, I'm going to jump to Julia's question, then we'll come back once you find the one that you want to.
Here we go. Here's the one. Okay, so you're saying all of these.
So if you click on manage next to one of those, yeah. So we'll look at that. That's lead distribution 0. So if you click manage and then just click reschedule job. And the question would be is who's now the running user of that job now?
But what's interesting about this one, these are like batches that it keeps resubmitting every 5 minutes. So even if I fix all these, that's just for this particular scheduled job. How do
So
I?
I think it's probably whatever the source of those are, the ones that are actually scheduling that would be the thing that you'd probably have to update. But if you look at that one that you just edited, I don't know what you're sorting this by, but if you sort by like last modified by or submitted date or something like that, I'm curious what it has now as the running user for lead distribution 0.
It's wonky filters the thing to work because hold on, there's too many jobs to look at here. Job date. Okay, so we do that. Do we do all these reschedule? Are they disappearing? Let's see. Or rather, I can't even click the back button. It literally opens in a new window. Okay. I
Yeah, your filter, I think you put
Oh, 'cause-
like today's date or something, or
but when
you put
I'm
some date in the past.
wait, aren't I actually changing the time that it's running
Yeah,
now?
but look at your filter of the view that you have.
Right.
No, literally look at the filter of the view
Oh,
that you have.
wait. This interface just drives me nuts. This is so tacky. Okay, how the hell do you use this thing?
Yeah, right there. So you have your submitted date equals some date in 2020. So I think you should remove all filters and just click on the header and it'll sort it by the date and put the most recent ones at the top. Yeah, just click on that submitted. Yeah, and that should put the most recent stuff up there. Or hit it again because now it's backwards.
Does it still say 2020? See, I feel like it's you. These are
No,
running.
hit submitted one more time to sort it the other way.
Okay, sorry. Okay, hold on.
So the two you restarted are at the top now. The fourth and
Yeah,
third.
so there's
third.
5 and 10, and now
Right.
the submitted by is you.
Time we didn't actually get to the source apex, which is the second part of my question. Like, do I have to actually, because I feel like the next time it runs, it's just going to put it back in the person who created the apex class or trigger or something originally.
Well, I guess what you have to answer is what is the source job that's actually firing those things off, right? And I think that one, if it's running as a particular user, it's probably going to schedule the new jobs as that same user. So whatever the source of that is, I think that's the one that you'd have to make sure you update. So it might be a good idea just to go through, update all of them to be you, and then see what happens and go from there.
So that's what I'm trying to get at, because how do I determine the trigger as far as there's a bunch of apex here and lead distribution. There's one called lead distribution, although I don't know if it's the master. No, actually, it's not that. Sorry, that's why I have to filter, because there's just way too many things running. I don't know. If I did like,
Well, yeah, I don't know if we're going to get to the bottom of this one, because there's, like you said, there's a lot of jobs there, and that lead distribution, is that custom code that's in your org, or is that part of some kind of package that you have?
it's all custom, and that's the problem. It's like whoever created this, whatever admin created this, like I'm trying to get at how do I get to the root of rescheduling that trigger or I mean, it's on lead. So I mean, we
Well, it
can
would
look
be
at
a trigger. Yeah, it would be a trigger. Scheduled Apex is either going to come, it's going to be through the Apex class scheduling mechanism or through like a flow or something.
right, but
Um,
now you can see Apex triggers here too, right?
yeah, but
These
it's
are
not a trigger. Triggers are not scheduled. Scheduled jobs are something completely different than triggers. So it wouldn't be here. Unless
okay.
you have a trigger that's firing off a scheduled Apex, which that's a red flag right then and there.
Why is that?
Because you don't want to schedule scheduled Apex from a trigger. Because in a lot of cases, if you have well, you can do it, but you got to be very careful. Because if you update 200 records, now you're trying to spin up 200 scheduled jobs and things like that. So it's just something you got to be cautious of doing. Um, so red flag. Not saying it's a bad, always a bad thing, but it's definitely something to be aware of.
So I guess, is there any way to sort of like backtrace this to figure out, okay, what is actually spawning this job so that each time it's scheduled?
Yeah, see that
Oh,
Apex
is it
class right
here?
there? That's what I would look at. Yeah.
Okay. Async distribution. So that's the class.
All right. Because we're a little bit in the weeds on Apex and it's custom for your org, I'm going to pause for right now for this use case. I want to hit Julia real quick, and then we can come back if we don't have any other questions here.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so take a quick pause. Julia, you've had your hand up for a while. What do you got?
Okay. Okay. I don't know. Still on this round robin thing. Now I've got an entry criteria of new, and I did a formula is new. So I only want it to go to round robin if it's a new created record. My question is, how do you debug it on a flow? Because if you've created the record, it's not new anymore. Is there a way to debug? I know it's
Yeah,
working though when I create them because they're doing it, but I just wanted to see if there's a way to debug it.
yeah, I thought there was a way when you click on debug where you could specify it's like the update or create action. Is there any chance you could share your screen and we can take a look at that, or?
Let me see. I guess it's okay. No content being shared. Okay. Is this being recorded though?
It is being recorded for quality assurance and training purposes, yes. And for
Okay.
YouTube, and
Yeah, so maybe not.
I'm going to print out the
Sorry.
recording and send it to my parents, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. I see
Oh.
and updated, run immediately, but then do I not put a ticket in there for reference?
No,
when
so you would
I
select one, and I'm trying to think if I have a flow here that I can do this. Is this a screen flow that you're working with, or a record triggered flow?
a record trigger flow.
Record triggered flow. Okay, let me grab one. Then I'll.
Do you debug? Can you change it to just skip the criteria, or is that a different one?
I think it's. I think you can specify like, do you want to do this thing as insert or update? So I want to pull this up, and then I want to explain this. This is a good one. So I have a case one here. Let's see if this will work. It's loading. Must know Salesforce has been very slow today.
Might have something to do with that global outage we had this week.
Could be. I wish I could get metrics on how many hours in my lifetime I spent staring at a Salesforce screen loading.
I
Okay,
would
here we
like
go.
to start tracking how many tickets I have to put in before I get an actual answer and not some help desk articles.
Okay,
Like I
so,
haven't gone through everything already.
all right, here we go. So this is Julia, you can see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is just some random record triggered flow that I'm running on the case object. Now, when I want to debug this, I can select an existing case that I have. And then there's this option here, like run it as if this record that we selected is being updated, and then you can make changes, or you can just say created. So it'll have the behavior like this thing that you selected was just inserted. So that is new path, you would expect that when you select that as created, the is new would be true.
I tried that. I thought it didn't seem to go down the path and it went down the other path, which was end. So I will try that again. And the
And
formula I used was is new because my entry criteria is, I'm not sure what your entry is. Mine is created and edited. Okay,
yeah,
updated. Yep.
so
That's all the
created or
same.
updated. And
Yep,
then
it's
you're
the
saying
same
that
thing.
instead of doing like conditions where you selected them, you put a formula evaluates the true, and you said like is new, like that.
Well, I can't do it because it's not, so I'm using record type. So my first decision is if it's a certain record type, because we're only applying it to that record type.
Yeah.
When that record type is whatever it is, new, and then I put another decision after the record type, and I evaluate that formula to new, is new true rather.
So you got like a formula field?
I have a formula field.
Yeah.
And then if that record is new, then it goes down the round robin. If it's not, then it ends.
Okay. Before I give you my feedback, Ryan, I saw you raise your hand. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's been a minute, but I'm pretty sure that once they introduced this formula for your conditions, now you can just access the record's record type developer name directly through a formula right here. So that might solve your record type issue.
So I should be able to go to like record. Yeah, so
Right.
now you can actually get to like well, that's master record. I don't know if I
Yeah, you should,
I don't
you
think
should
I've
see the record.
Ooh,
There it is. Record
okay.
type by, there's ID, but I believe you can get to the, you can
Yeah.
step through and get to the name.
to the
Yeah.
Oh
name.
my gosh. So do it right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But I don't want that entry
it's
there
a
though, because
triggered
the
flow.
reason I can't do it there though, because I'd still need to go down the other branches. So if you make that at the beginning, then it won't enter the other parts of the branches.
Well, is it for all record types or just select record types?
Just select record types.
You can still do an or here. You can just say or. It's kind of double logic, right? But if you put it in the entry criteria and then you also put it in the decision branch, if anybody knows a better suggestion, that's the only way I've found to keep the flow from not actually triggering right? Because you're kind of saying it twice. You're saying don't even trigger the flow if it doesn't meet these record types, but then you still have to add the decision branch. Does that make sense?
So, okay, continue. So what were you, let me see what, if you're saying it has to be a certain record type and is new.
Well, let me take
It
a
doesn't
quick step
sound
back.
like this fits your situation, but
Yeah,
sorry.
so
Yeah.
just
Sorry,
just
Bill.
to take a step back, Julia. So you want this to only run, well, it's going to run when it's new or it's updated. It's just going to take different branches depending on if it's new or if it's updated, right?
Well, okay, so at the beginning it says created, updated, and then the first decision is what type of record type you are, because each record type has an is new or not. So one
Okay.
of the record types has is new. That's why the second decision after that it branches off is this a particular record type.
Okay. So
We'll call it
let me
record
pause
type
you there.
A. Mhm,
Let me pause you there. So your entry criteria for your flow is basically empty. Let's
that's
just say
right.
that it's empty for now. Your
Yes,
first decision that you come to is which record type is this? And let's just say a
correct.
record type A, B, and C. So you got branches that come off of those.
Yes,
And then let's just say B, it's very important that when it's record type B, that you have a specific set of logic you want to do when it's new and a specific set of logic that you're going to do when it's not.
correct.
So you have a formula field that you created through
Yes,
the resource uh, thingy over here. So we do is
yes,
new. You did a variable, you created a thing, actually not a variable. You would do a formula. And then in your
correct.
logic here, you just say like is new, right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, so then under that record type decision for record type B, you have another decision that says, is this thing new? And that would look like in here, if we edit this decision, you have a thing here and you would say like is new, and then you're just selecting your variable is new equals true.
True. That's
Yeah,
right. You got it.
that
You
seems
got it.
that seems right. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So when you debug that and you select a record and you select where it's created in the checkbox, you're saying it's not following that path though?
Let me do it right now. Created, I'll pick a ticket. Don't feel me
It
now.
sounds like logically, it sounds like you have everything correct. You select your record types first, then if it's new,
Okay,
you go one path,
created.
not the other.
Yeah, I'm gonna run it immediately, create it, I'm gonna run it. Yeah, it goes down the no path.
First thing I would check would be your formula for is new. Just make sure that
Okay.
that looks like correct, where your formula just is new. And
Mm-hmm.
then the second thing I would check is your decision element and make sure that it's configured correctly where you have like is new equals true.
Yep, I have that.
Okay, and you looked at your formula and that looks okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this working in when you do it on a regular record and not in debug?
Yeah, it does. It
Yeah, so
finds it.
it's one of those issues with Flow that if you give it a record that already exists, it doesn't hand over, even if you say it's created in the selection at the top, it's still gonna not understand the database just got that record.
It seems
It's
like
making
it's a
some
complete waste to
assumptions
have
there.
that created radio button there then. What's the purpose of
Yeah,
it?
it's really only saying the fields that all the fields are handled as empty, but it's not, or whatever you put in the preview. But it doesn't, I noticed that as well. Like it's not picking up the database call. There's something new coming in. Like it's not committed.
So I swore that I've tested this with create and update and it has worked. Is Stephen, you have to have like a reference here, like a known issue or like a help thing, or at least somebody like posting, just because I'm curious, because I know that I've
I
done
will look
this.
that up. I will look that up.
Yeah, that'd be great. I thought I was losing my mind. Okay, good. I just want to confirm that there's
I
not
think
a real way to test it.
there might be some ways to test it, but it would require kind of changing the way you're operating to maybe instead of using an is new, use a prior value of the ID. Doesn't match the current value, because I think what's going to happen when you click the created is it's going to
Mhm.
ignore any prior values. I don't know that. I'd have to test it, but
Yeah.
Oh,
that could be a way to do it. Yeah, if you think you've got it up, Bill. So
I don't, but I think that's interesting. So I wonder then if we created a formula and we just call this thing like is new, and data type is going to be Boolean. And then what you're saying is I can go in here and say where the record ID.
Yeah, and you wouldn't even need a formula. You could do this directly in your with the conditional logic. You know, prior value not equal current.
Yeah. So essentially we could try that, but essentially the logic would look something like that.
Yeah.
Do we
But then
even
the
need,
question is, why would that work? But is new wouldn't work, you know?
Well, again, it's just a theory that maybe that's how it
Yeah.
implements the whole created, is that it just ignores any prior values. I don't know, because I don't know how it implements it under the hood.
Right now I'm curious. Okay, hold on a minute. Let's so this is good flow stuff here. So let's see if we go into a brand new flow. Maybe I should do this in dev work instead of my production work, because you never know what stupid thing I might do, you know? So if I said new flow, and we're going to make this a record triggered flow. And in Julia's use case, we were doing when it's created or updated. And I'm just going to pick an object that I know I have here. So a project object. So, all right. So that's like the basic. We have a project created or updated, no other conditions after actions. And I want to put a decision block here. And actually, before I do that, let's create that as new. So you have this as a formula called is new with is new done. Well, Boolean done. And then if we just had a single decision element, we're going to say, is this new, question mark? Yes. My capitalization is killing me. I'm going to lose sleep over this, just so you guys know. So resource is new equals true. That means it's new. And if it's not, it's that. Okay. All right. So in the case where it's true, where it's a new, I'm going to say where I'm going to go to record. Wait, what the hell am I doing here? Update, triggering record, and we're going to set the name to X's. So just so we can have something here. The name is going to be equal to X. And then I'm going to copy this. We'll paste it over here. And in this case, if it's not new, we're going to set the name to YYY. So what I'm curious, so now when we do this, let me save this, and we're just going to call this test flow. All right, and then because I can't stand when they both end up at the same place, we're going to add separate ends. Save. Okay, so the theory here is if I debug and I select, let's start with the easy one. We'll do updated, and I'll select an existing project here. When I run this, it should take that is new no path, which it does. Now, if Salesforce wants to make me sad today, you're telling me that if I select created and I go to this, it's going to take the no path. Now it does. So it's new. So that tells me that debug created thing is in fact working correctly. So I have
What
to think,
API
Julia,
version
there's
are
got
you?
to be something in your logic that needs adjusting.
What API version are you on?
Oh, I
You
know
probably
what it
created
is.
this with 61, right?
No, I added an, I forgot. I did add an additional criteria.
That'll do it.
That other additional criteria is one of the fields is null, and it's not right now.
Okay.
So I have to go change it to null, and then I think it would go back. Okay, I think I figured it out. Dumb question. All right.
Julia,
Okay.
not a dumb question. And just to very quickly share, this week I spent 4 days trying to figure out why an email wasn't being sent to, like I updated a flow and I'm trying to figure out why the new send email action wasn't firing. Only to realize after all that time that I never really looked at the start criteria. And one of the criteria there was that it's only going to trigger when the created by is equal to these 4 people. And of course, the person I was testing out was a 5th person. So
Yeah.
it happens sometimes. Yeah, you gotta.
Okay, cool. So, and I'm also curious if I do an is changed formula, and the other branch, which is a different record type, I want it to set once, but I don't want it to keep resetting or going down the round robin path. I only want it to occur if the record type is changed. So I could use an is changed on that, perhaps.
You're talking about the record type is changed.
Let's say it starts out as a record type A, and then it converts to record type B.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's being done, but if it does, then it wouldn't be considered new, right? It's just a record type change.
Yeah, it's an update at that point. Yeah.
It's an update at that point, right? So then on that one, I only wanted to change once, but because the record type doesn't continuously change and it's been assigned once, I don't want it to keep going through the round robin and getting reassigned a new person. So I should probably use an is changed on that branch. That's what I'm thinking right now.
I'm going to give
If
you
that
a
might work.
tentative yes, but I'm not sure
Okay.
I'm fully tracking exactly what it is that you're trying to do with the change. So you have is new, which is the record new. If you were to check whether or not the record type is changed, you should be able to use the is changed. But the question you ask, like, I don't want to keep going through the round robin. I think that's a much bigger question that we'd have to see the full logic just to make sure that it's not going to continue going through there.
Well, because that path is created and updated, and I know, suppose the record gets updated in some way, but the record type is still record type B. It went from A to B, and on B, we want it to reassign a new round robin individual, but we don't want it to keep resetting. Then I think I could use the is changed formula on that
to prevent that from happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you would want to do is have some kind of logic that says only go down this path if the record type hasn't changed. So in other words, if it was record type A and it's already done some stuff and you're changing it to B, you don't want it to go through the record type B's assignment logic and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think you could do that through a decision element with the is changed function on the record type. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And
right.
Yeah, I think as Stephen mentioned in the chat too, and similar to what Ryan mentioned earlier, is new, is changed. There's alternate ways that you could potentially do that by looking at the record and the prior record global variables. So you could say, like, was the field prior value different than the current value? And that's essentially like the is changed type logic.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Can I ask one thing on that? One or two?
Yeah.
Is it necessary to even use, excuse me, to use is new anymore? Because you can just do record, can't you just do record ID is null is true as an alternative to actually creating a is new in a formula?
I have absolutely no idea, but that's something that unless somebody has a definitive answer right now, I can easily test here.
I've used that before. You just do record type is null, and that'll
or ID is null.
Record ID. Sorry, ID is null.
So instead of using my formula, you're saying if I do record, so triggering record dot ID.
Yeah.
It might vary whether it's before save or after save.
As long as it's a. Oh, that might only work on before save flows.
Yeah. Whereas if you go is new, it'll work no matter what. So it's kind of.
But that's actually works on before save flows. You don't have to do is new and create a variable and all that, because the record, if you think about it, the ID isn't actually created until the record's committed. The DML operation finishes. So that's kind
of like when it saves. It's not the commit. It's the save.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I would caution you, and this is something that Stephen, I think you actually brought up months ago when it had to do with using assignment elements or using update elements. And you mentioned that, yes, when you're in the before trigger, you can use assignment, but you can also just use the update. And the benefit of that is that if you switch it from a before triggered flow to an update, it'll work both ways. So I'm thinking that this might be the same thing, where if you put your criteria where the ID is equal to null, that would work if it's a before triggered flow, but for whatever reason, if you need to then switch it to an after, maybe that logic might fall apart at that point. So it might be better just to use the as new, which would work in both cases. So yeah, something to think about, Ken.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. We have about 5 minutes left. Any other questions or topics that anybody would like to go through?
I had that nice troubleshooting tool that I got to successfully use again this week.
What's that?
The nice troubleshooting tool where when something isn't working properly and you bring someone else to show them why it's not or how it's not working properly to
Oh,
help
then
them
it
figure
works.
it out, and it suddenly works.
When you go to the doctor, it never hurts, right? You always feel fine.
That's my favorite troubleshooting tool.
Yeah.
And I've actually even invited people. I'm like, okay, I can't figure this out, so I'm going to invite you in so that it starts working properly.
But in all seriousness, there is something about that, like talking through the problem with somebody, because I often find that, right? It's like you sit there, bang your head against the wall, and then let me just ask somebody, as you're explaining to them, you realize the solution, right? Like as you're talking it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we have a few minutes left. Ken, or not Ken, Greg, I see you have a hand up. What do you got?
Yeah, real quickly, for flows, you can create test flows and test your flows that way instead of just using the debug. That way you can control recreating the records all the time so that when you test your flows, well, that you're consistent. You're not grabbing, say, a random record and then that way you can do more sophisticated testings and repetitively. And we haven't gone down that path, I don't think, much.
Yeah. I've definitely, how can I say this, dabbled in the flow testing. And Steve, I think between you and I, we've banged our heads against walls trying to deal with this in the past. But yeah, I think the theory there with the flow test in here, I'll just share my screen just so we can look at this real quick. The theory is that, yeah, you create a record triggered flow, and you want to make sure that every single time that this thing runs, that whatever changes you made hadn't broken your assumptions and your expectations of what the flow is going to do. So I think if I save this, well, let me get into, yeah, so you can go to view tests. So you can actually kind of like set up, tests to say, okay, in this test, I want to, when a record is created, you can set up the triggering record to say, okay, here's what I want it to look like, when the save happened. And then in the end, I want to verify, okay, after this flow runs, I expect that this particular field, on the record, let's just say it's the name is going to be equal to y, right? So when you do that, when you save this test, then whenever you need to go into this flow and make changes to the logic, you have that kind of suite of tests that you can run that would, validate that you hadn't broken something that was you didn't intend to, right? So yeah, definitely something worthwhile to start looking at with your flows. I think my experience has been that they're great for basic stuff and maybe simple logic, but they can get pretty clunky to write those tests. Anybody have more experience with flow tests that might speak to it?
Yeah, I agree. It's super clunky. And then like you can't do negative test either, which is like a big limitation. And so sometimes like I'll write in the description, like the expectation is this test should fail in this way. So if you've got like a record which shouldn't trigger the flow and you want to make sure that the start criteria is working properly, you can try and kind of get around it like that. And then yeah, just important to note, it's only for record triggered flows on create or update. So you can't do it on like delete record triggered flows, can't do it auto launch flows, can't do it scheduled flows, can't do it screen flows. So quite limited still.
Yeah. Now, one option, and I'll throw this out there as the last comment because we're just about out of time. But one thing to consider is if you have flows and you're really good with building your flow logic and you really want to make sure those things are tested, and you also happen to have expectations in the future that you would like to be a developer, writing Apex test classes to test your flows is a thing. You could do that. You're testing the exact same thing. So you insert a record and then you put a bunch of assertions to validate that it's working correctly. But if you ever wanted to dabble into Apex in a safe way that you don't have to worry about blowing anything up, writing test classes would be a great first place to do that. So something to consider for those. Any last thoughts before we part ways here?
I would just say I am interested in if the group hasn't had that experience, like you said, you've both had some sort of wonky experiences with it, but it is something I always struggle with too. So the test class, if we wanted to do that in a session, I think that would be nice to see how that works in practice.
I think that would be a decent one to do. I think we could do that in like 10, 15 minutes to show like a basic use case with a flow and then how to test that via Apex. I think that's something that we could do in a future
Sorry,
session.
not Apex. I meant just the normal flow test debugging,
Yeah.
whatever.
Flow test for Lean. We're going Apex. We're not doing those. No, anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile. We can test it out.
I thought you already demoed that once for us.
I think we might have. Yeah, I don't know if I still have all my notes and all that stuff, but yeah, might be
I
worth a
missed it.
rehash at some point in the future. You guys know I don't name things very well, so even if I have it in an org that I still have access to, I probably have no idea what it is. So
Chump.
I got
Probably related
yeah,
to
exactly,
Chump.
exactly. I probably have 400 flows called test flow 1 through 400. So all right, all. Well, thank you very much for another great session. Hope you all have a great weekend, and we will catch up next week. Thanks all.
Bye.
Have a good one.